All right, everybody, joined by Paul Garcia here of Project Spurs and host of the Spurs Cast. He's our San Antonio Spurs correspondent for the Alley-Oop. Paul, thank you so much for hopping on. Been a tough season for the Spurs, man. This has been a frustrating one for sure.
Yeah, man. Just 5 wins in 33 games. Right now, again, it's almost like they break one losing streak, and then here comes another one. So it's like right now they're on a 3-game losing streak. It's even more tough for this team right now just because of Victor Wembanyama situation where he's on a minutes restriction. They're basically missing their best player for chunks of a game now. He's not allowed to play in back to backs consecutively. And then even like their 2 wins against the Lakers and the Blazers, a lot of those teams where they really needed Wembanyama out there, and some of those teams sat a lot of their key players. So it's almost like what would they do against it? They haven't got a win against a team that's at full health yet.
Yeah, it's been tough, and I know that the team they've escaped some of the criticism that I think Detroit has seen, and there's a lot of ire that's been thrown Detroit's direction based on, hey, when you lose that many games in a row, obviously it's going to come around, but still the numbers aren't really kind to San Antonio. They're 29th in net rating, 28th in offense, 25th in defense. Like, it's been a really, really tough season. And I know that was kind of our expectation that things wouldn't be awesome immediately, but I think between you and me, we thought that the team would at least be a little bit more functional around what Wemby's been doing. And so tell me about that then. I didn't know that he was on a minutes restriction. I didn't know that was a thing. I know that he plays lower minutes in some cases, but I didn't know that it was actually a restriction of sorts. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so he had some sort of ankle injury a few games ago in like mid December, and then against Dallas on December 23rd, it's a Saturday night. The Spurs are on the road. He's about to take the floor. The team's about to play the actual game. He's like in the layup line, before the game, and he like makes a layup or a dunk, and then as he's like kind of falling back on the baseline, there's a ball boy under there from the Mavs, and Wemby steps on his foot and he rolls his ankle, and so there's video that went around. He said he felt fine after the game. I mean, after that happened, he didn't think he was like really injured, but the Spurs and the medical team, wanted to be very cautious. And so they held him out of that game against the Mavs. And then now ever since that point, he's not allowed to play in 2 consecutive back-to-back games. He also has a 24 minute restriction where he can only play 24 minutes in a game at this point. And so you can tell he's getting frustrated by what happened in the most recent game on Tuesday night. The Spurs are on the road at Memphis. Even though they're down by 15 with 3 minutes left when he gets taken out of the game, he actually checks himself back in without even telling the coaches. And he just walks back and calls the player to get in. And he ends up going back into the game. He ends up playing a defensive possession, and then he scores on an offensive possession. And the Spurs are only down by like 10 or 8. And but then the coaches saw what he did, and so then they yank him again for the final 2 minutes, and he goes back and sits down. He didn't put up an argument or anything. But after the game, he was asked about, why did you do this, or were you supposed to go out there? And he basically said no, that he kind of did that on his own. He just said it was more in the heat of the moment, like he was frustrated that the game was within reach and he had to just sit there. And so he basically feels like he's ready to go, that he's healthy, but he knows that he kind of understands the medical team's approach, that it's best for him to play it safe, be cautionary, make sure you're 100% well with that ankle before going back out there. And so for him, it was more so a moment of frustration where he got frustrated that he had to be out at a key moment of the game.
Yeah, I can imagine the frustration, especially when the team is losing the way that it is. He wants to do everything that he can when he feels good, when he feels healthy, to be able to get stuff done. That's tough. That is a frustrating situation, I have to imagine, and I know that it's like, especially for him, where he's been shouldering this burden of expectation for as much as he has. That's got to be a frustrating one. I know that there's also been a narrative kind of going around nationally. I don't know how like much it is, but that sometimes teammates are missing him on passes. Sometimes teams are missing him on the duck-ins and forcing up shots when there really should, like, there's an easy play to call. It's throwing it to the 7'5" guy. Probably not a bad idea. And I just wanted to know if there was any truth to that, in your estimation.
Yeah, there is some truth to that, but again, I'm not saying that they're doing it on purpose to teammates. It's more so that like they were just thrown into a really frustrating situation. Jeremy Sohan, for the first 20 games of the year, he gets thrown into the point guard role, which is not his natural position. He's never played it before in his life as his full-time position, and so he really struggled with that position. It's hard, when your point guard's out there having difficulties. It's hard for the rest of the team to kind of find players, and so they've kind of slowly started experimenting with different lineup changes. Sohan went back to being just his normal position as the 4. They got Malachi Branham there as the point guard now. And so even for him, he's more so a shooting guard. He's like a combo guard. He's never been like a natural point guard. So again, they're still kind of experimenting. They won't put the actual point guard Trey Jones out there, even though Jones does find Wemby a lot more on like alley-oop finishes and things like that. He probably finds him the best out there, but they still don't want to go with that approach. Now, I'm not going to say that Jones is going to save the situation. They're still losing games even with Trey Jones and Wemby out there together at times. But then also just the most recent move they had was that they moved now Keldon Johnson, who's one of the high usage players, to the bench role. He's a 6-man role now. And now Pop basically said the reason for this is to get Devin and Wemby more touches together, kind of let them create. And so I think since we've seen that move of Keldon going to the bench, you have seen a better job of the Spurs players out there with him, finding him more often, whether it's near the paint or out on the 3-point line. So he has been getting more touches, and even his usage, you can see, has dramatically gone up since Keldon went to the bench. And so I think it is a work in progress. Again, I don't think they're deliberately missing him, but I think a lot of these players are not used to just throwing to a 7'5" guy out there, and then just starting off out of the gate with the player who's not naturally a point guard. And Sohan was probably not the best of ideas.
Yeah, it's obviously a very freak thing. And then San Antonio is clearly trying a lot of stuff. They are doing what they can to see what they need to do for Wemby in the future. And all of this is geared towards building data points. And I understand that prospect of it, but especially with the current cast of guys, it's got to be frustrating. Like I can understand if I was a player, if I was a fan of the team, if I was somebody that wanted to see as functional of basketball as possible, why wouldn't Trey Jones be out there? Why wouldn't they be going with a functional look? Why are you trying to force feed some things that aren't clear? They're clearly not going to work, and that can wear on a fan base. It can wear on a player. It can be like they have to have a lot of flexibility, and they have to have a lot of leeway from Wemby's camp to be continuing to try this, I think.
Yeah, and just I think another reason why the fans were frustrated is kind of the message that came out of training camp. Coach Pop went out there and said, wins are more important this year than learning and development was the last few years, and so that was one thing that kind of set this kind of high, not a huge bar, again, not play in, not playoffs, but more than being a bottom 3 team again like they were last year. And basically all the stats are showing this team is probably going to be worse than last year. Like honestly, they've already had more 40-point deficits than they did of all of last year. Like last year I just did the 35-point deficits. They were down by 35 only 10 times last year. They've already done it 7 times this year when Boston blew them out the other night. So again, I think that just in terms of the team on the floor right now, they're actually worse statistically than last year, and I think that's where fans are really frustrated, especially even Wemby, a player who obviously we didn't expect him to the Spurs to be a playoff team, but even him, he had said he wanted to win games this year. It's not like he just wants to be out there trying to tank and get like a bottom 3 pick or bottom top 10 pick, should I say.
Yeah, I'm sure that the success that Chet is having in OKC is probably not helping matters for him, where you see another guy that you're being compared to, and he's in this awesome situation where they've got all these young guys going the same direction. And San Antonio's just not in that status right now. They're not in that space to be able to do that. So you, Paul Garcia, how would you right the ship if you were given the keys to the car? What are people locally saying? What are people hoping that happens over the course of these next 6 to 8 weeks or so in terms of just making this a more functional situation?
So I think in terms of just one thing that's going to happen, I think that could be a positive for this team is that they finally get the easiest part of their schedule coming up here in this month of January. They're going to see the Charlotte. They're going to see them twice. They're going to see the Pistons once. They're going to see the Wizards twice. They're going to see Portland basically from last week to the end of the month. They're going to see Portland 3 times basically, and so they're going to get hopefully some wins against these bad teams, and I think that'll make them feel a little bit better. Maybe they have by the end of this month they have 10 wins, which that could it's still not great obviously, but I think that's one thing is that just naturally the calendar should allow them to get more wins under their belt in this coming month. The second part is I think fans just want to see more impactful trades. Again, I think that they end up dealing some of these veteran players like a Jetty Osman, like a Doug McDermott to contenders, but more so for like draft capital, second round picks, those kind of things. And I think that the fans will want to see, gets even though you're not aiming for the play-in or the playoffs this year, get somebody in trades that can be an impact player for not only the rest of the season but also next season. I think that's what they want to see. They don't want to see just moves to get draft assets and things like that or young players. They want to just see someone that's going to help at least next season's situation, because a lot of these players, barring trades, they should should be back. A lot of their core players like Keldon Johnson, like Devin Vassell, like Sohan, all those guys should be back. And so we're seeing that even in this next year of these with these players, that this team doesn't project to be very good again.
So we've talked previously about how, especially a lot of this year, is finding the right players, the right cast to build around Wemby, to build around the future of this group and what it's going to look like for the foreseeable future. With the guys that you're talking about, bringing in players that could be impact players, not just now, but in the near future. Like I think of second draft guys. I think of guys in the 2020 NBA draft, the 2021 NBA draft that haven't really had a ton of success in their current situations. That you go to the Spurs, they give you a different situation. They might be names to watch. I'm not sure even who I'd be talking about with that, but wouldn't surprise me if they target some of those guys at the deadline. Also, like I'm curious, what are the positions that San Antonio would be trying to identify? Is this a new point guard over Trey Jones? Is this just a good big man to pair with Wemby? Like, what is the vision here?
Yeah, I think for sure, point guard's got to probably be that one key position right now, just because that's been the hole for them. Obviously, we've seen it that they consider Trey Jones, I guess, like a backup. They tried Sohan, didn't work out. They're trying Malachi Branham. That's basically not going to work out, long term. And so and then do they evaluate the draft? There's like Isaiah Collier out there from USC. If they end up getting the number one pick, they could have that. They could have control there.
Sure.
Or like you said, going and looking at a point guard who maybe hasn't had his way in the league yet, like figured out like a former second round kind of pick. So I think point guard's the main position. I also think another wing out there, more like a 3-and-D kind of wing, but more established. So right now they have Julian Champagnie doing that, where he's a lights out shooter, but again, his volume's pretty low. And then defensively, he's not like that, that league average kind of level defensive player. And so I think that's also been a hole for them, is like, because Keldon Johnson, they kind of moved him to the bench. They haven't really found a spot for him. I don't know if Keldon's going to be in their long-term plans. And so I'd say, like, in terms of like who are the locks for this rebuild, I think it's Wemby for sure and Vassell. But other than that, like, I would still, like, I feel like everybody else is kind of in play to, like, we don't know whether or not they're going to be with the Spurs, just because they don't really know where their position is. A player like Malachi Branham, a player like Jeremy Sohan, Zach Collins, you kind of see what he is already at this point, and he's only going to get older as the years go on. So again, I think point guard's the key position, but then again, I just think other positions are still kind of the doors wide open, just because I think unless it's Vassell or Wemby, everyone else can't, their long-term future with the Spurs kind of looks kind of questionable right now.
All right, so we're thinking probably some trade deadline deals for a guy like Doug McDermott, for a guy like Chetty Osman.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. That to me it's just the logical step in this situation. Try to get back some assets and maximize a little bit. Are there other questions that you have for this group that you're hoping that they answer over the course of the rest of this season? What are some things that you are targeting, trying to figure out? Is it identifying certain players that can play with Wemby going forward? Is it clarifying some of these positions? What is the goal in your mind for the rest of the year?
I'm just more interested in see if how long do they continue to try to, I guess, like try to win, even though it's been difficult for them, like before they get to that point where, like, they're sitting guys and having the guys from Austin come up and get a lot more minutes, and then that's kind of where I'm at. Right now, they, based on the rotations they're playing, they're still trying to play their best players out there every night. They're not going, like last year. We knew exactly when it was time to start tanking. Like, you could just tell by some of the lineups they were putting out and the players they were holding out. So right now they really are still trying to put their best group forward. And I do want to see, what is the defensive potential of this team? We saw for about a 2-week stretch in like early December, they were actually doing really good when they made a starting lineup change by putting Wemby at the 5. For about 2 weeks, they were like a top 10 defense statistically, and then that's kind of fallen off now. They're getting outscored, like crazy in different areas of the floor. And so that's one thing is, how good can this team be defensively? And then, at one point, do they finally just say, this season's kind of a wash, and they start sitting some key players?
Should probably also mention the Charles Bassey injury.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one. He was a backup center for San Antonio. They just applied for the DPE, the traded the injured player exception. So we'll see whether they actually use that. But I'm sure that the roster right now is still in flux, and we're still trying to figure out what is actually going to come about that. But I'm curious to see what this team does around the trade deadline. Man, it should be interesting. Any final takeaways here on this check-in?
No, just like, it's going to get, like I said, it's going to probably be a better month this coming month. It won't look as bad for the Spurs record in terms of wins, losses. They should have a better month this month, just playing the easiest part of their schedule. And then like kind of like it's like we both said about the trade deadline, do they make just those moves to acquire assets with some of those veteran players, or do they actually go in and try to find someone who can be a key contributor? Again, I doubt they'll do that, but that would be the more interesting question to watch.
Who knows? We will see. Maybe it's Tyus Jones. Maybe you reunite the Jones
Yeah.
guys and see that would make some sense to try to help out Wemby. So we will see. Everybody has to remember that Wemby is awesome. Like I just looked up his numbers. He's averaging 19 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, and a steal. Like the dude is still crazy, and it is always going to be a joy to watch him. I hope that we get to watch him in better circumstances going forward. But he is Paul Garcia of Project Spurs and of the Spurs Cast. Thank you so much, Paul, for stopping by. Really appreciate you taking the time. Let's chat after the deadline, all right?
Awesome, man. Sounds good.
Cool.